Hello and welcome back to The Drag Detective. I'm Derek and today we are going to discuss Season 7. How it should have gone. And obviously that's a broad term. Basically, I'm trying to make the least rigged version I possibly can, which has proven to be a little bit difficult because the seasons that are heavily rigged are then way harder to unrig because so many things change and so many people are around for longer and people that make it far go home early. And it's always a hard task. This season is, I would say, one of the harder ones. And what I thought would happen going in is not what happened on the other side. So this is going to be a wild ride. Obviously, this is just my interpretation. You might have a different one, but I'm going to try and cite examples and do all that I can to make the best case for my interpretation as I can. Without further ado, let's just jump right in with episode 1, which is the Born Naked design sort of challenge where they have to do 2 runways, a fall and a spring, as well as make a resort wear striptease look that then reveals into a naked illusion. And I mean, I'm assuming that they were given in the package, the list of things to bring a nude illusion, because so many of these queens have bodysuits, naked bodysuits, and then others don't. But something I did take into account is I guess you would call it the mini challenge, but it kind of just feels like part 1 of the main challenge, which were the 2 runway looks, because it's not like we had a winner for that mini challenge. And they do talk about those looks in the final critiques. So kind of like on season 12, I think it all just factors into one challenge. So I took that into consideration when making my placements. So let's break it down. The winner does not change. I think Violet had one of the top moments of the logo era Drag Race seasons, period, with her reveal. And she makes the bold choice to go full naked, no bodysuit, no nothing, just bare ass naked. Same with Katya in this challenge. And I think that the look that she made for the resort wear, both of her runway looks, I mean, this is just top tier drag. And, we expect nothing less from Violet. So I think this was a solid, unrigged win for her. As for the high placements, Fame, I definitely agree with, especially her runway looks in the fall and spring runways were, astounding. They were gorgeous. She is the fashion queen of this season, hands down, and she did not disappoint in this first episode. But I did switch out Kennedy Davenport for the other high placement, mostly because of her first looks in the fall and the spring categories. They're just a little... I guess it does. To me, it doesn't look like Kennedy's drag, or what I know Kennedy's drag to be, which is pageant, which is dance costumes, which is sparkle and glam and very high drag. And both of these looks are just so dowdy. They make her look like she's a 45-year-old woman, and I don't feel like it's a good representation of Kennedy or what the challenge is asking for. So I think that definitely brings her down a notch, even if she had one of the best nude illusions on the main stage. So I think that kind of just averages her to a safe performance, where I actually put Max in the top. You could argue a couple queens for this high placement, but I think that Max doing this kind of weird crutches performance, it stood out among the rest of the nude illusion performances. And I think both of her fall and spring looks are super, super fun. They're very different. The one is kind of more what Max does. That's kind of bringing 1940s, 1950s fashion into modern day. While the other one is definitely more, this feels very 2015. I don't know if this look necessarily ages super well in 2023, but in 2015, this look was so I think she did an overall really, really good job in this episode. And for the bottom 3, originally we had a bottom 4 of Tempest DuJour and Candy Ho, and then Sasha Bell and Jasmine Masters as the 2 lows. I don't think that Candy Ho did bad whatsoever. I think that she had some makeup issues with her beard that she painted on, but I think she fully was put in the bottom for her storyline with Tempest. because both of her spring and fall looks are stunning, and her nude illusion was good. It was a solid look. Whereas the other three that made up the bottom four, I think all had issues. Jasmine's looks, I think, could have been pushed a little bit further, and I know the judges had issues with her nude illusion not being nude enough with all of these tassels hanging, but I didn't mind that. I just think that the cocoon that she came out in was a little lazy. I mean, it wasn't a look, it was just, a vessel. So I put her as low, but I think Sasha Belle definitely deserved a bottom 2 here. Her one look, the lobster look, I actually love this look. I think it's pretty high concept. I think it's pretty fun. And I love the wig and the makeup choices and everything that she did with this look. The other one is just, I don't like the wig. I don't like the dress. I just don't think it's enough. And then obviously her nude illusion was not illusioning. So I think she really, struggled this episode. So if we have a bottom 2 of Sasha Belle and Tempest DuJour, what would happen? I think Tempest still goes home. Now, Sasha isn't the greatest lip syncer in the world at this point in her drag career on season 7, but I think to this song, Tempest was not giving. I don't think Sasha would have to do much to beat Tempest, unfortunately. And I mean, with how sexy we all know Sasha is as a man, I don't think she'd have much trouble kind of sexing up this song. Better spot than she was after this episode. So let's move on to episode 2, which was the Glamazonian Airways Challenge. I didn't change a ton about this episode. The bottom 3 does not change for me. Fame as low, with Katya and Sasha Belle in the bottom 2. Katya sends Sasha Belle home. What changes is the tops, because we have Violet Chachki and Kasha Davis as high in the actual episode, with Ginger Minj winning. I do think this was Kasha Davis's moment with her scat performance. It was really funny, and even though her runway look wasn't great, it still read more private jet than Ginger's did. Ginger's, I don't think, was private. I don't remember exactly, airline realness or whatever the category was. Or Ginger's was not that, literally at all. Kasha, I at least can see where she was going with this look fitting the category. But maybe this is a unpopular opinion, but I thought Trixie Mattel did a wonderful job in this challenge. And, she was the team captain. And I think her and Ginger both did really well as team captains. I think that when it comes to moments in this challenge, it's hard to say who was the best, because everyone gets a small sliver of screen time when they're in the spotlight. And most of them do a really good job. Kennedy does a good job. Max does a good job. Jaidynn Dior Fierce does a good job. Jasmine Masters. Violet, I also think, does a good job. And I think that Violet's runway was what kind of pushed her into that top territory. But for me, I think Trixie had a better moment of her, flying off the stage on the suitcase. And I think that she gave really good face during the entire performance. And I loved her runway. I think this would have been a great time for her to be in the top, getting some critiques about, her fashion and her drag, and kind of getting her perspective on that. I think this would have been a good moment for her. So moving on to episode 3, we have the Shakespeare Acting Challenge. And I wouldn't change anything about this episode. Obviously, I just showed 2 people in the high placement here, and I think that they both did a really good job. But all of Max's team is high, so that's Ginger, Trixie, Jaidynn Dior Fierce, Miss Fame, and Kasha. But Max, I think, won this challenge the second she gets Jaidynn out of her head in the filming of their skit. She showed that she is a good leader. She's not just looking out for herself. She wants the best for her entire team. And she does a really good job in the challenge, and then has one of, if not the best runway of this entire episode. So this really was, I think, a big standout moment for Max. A deserved win. And then when it comes to the bottom, I think that, there were multiple people that struggled on this other team, obviously. Violet struggled, Pearl struggled, but I think Pearl struggled a little bit more. And even though her runway was really, really, really good, Violet's was also really, really, really good. So I think it has to just go based off the challenge. and I would say Pearl is a little bit worse, but the bottom two make complete sense. Jasmine Masters fully gave up in this episode when it came to the challenge, when it came to the runway. I mean, this was just a full like self-sabotage moment. And for Kennedy, she just did not do what was asked of her as a leader. She didn't make sure her team felt prepared, and that really came across in how disastrous the recording process was. So I think her bottom two placement was very deserved. Also, her beard just looks like the toilet in a frat house, just like a pube salad, if you will. So they lip sync, and obviously Jasmine goes home. And we move on to the spoof challenge. Now, this is where things kind of go off the rails, because obviously I think the bottom two of Pearl and Trixie make sense, but Trixie going home here did not. So Pearl goes home, which is a vast change to the narrative of this season, because as we know, Pearl makes the final three, and her leaving in episode 4 is going to shift things around a lot. But let's look at the other placements. In the actual episode, Candy Ho is in the bottom 3. And I see where they're coming from. I don't think she stood out in the commercial much. And I don't think her runway was good whatsoever. But I actually put Max as low here because even though Candy was forgettable, she didn't do anything wrong in her commercial. Whereas Max, as Courtney Act, I don't think got it down at all. I mean, she does an accent trying to be Australian. I think it comes off more British. And when you're going to be Courtney, I guess she is a kind of a hard queen to impersonate because she doesn't have a huge personality. But especially on season 6, she was kind of coming off as like the bitchy, rich, skinny queen. And I think Max could have taken that a lot further than she did because her performance just ended up coming off stiff and a little awkward. And then her runway is not giving green, and that was the entire prompt of the runway. So I think Max definitely could have taken this low spot here over Candy. She just had more mistakes overall. And then when it came to the top 3, I agree with the top 3 that was given. RuPaul gave the best in each of the skits, and that was Katya, Kennedy, and Jaidynn. But to me, this was Jaidynn's win. She was so good as Bianca Del Rio, and especially coming off of her kind of breakdown in episode 3, recording the Shakespeare challenge. This was a huge comeback. She really was like, I'm just going to do this shit, and she did it. And especially coming right after season 6, where Bianca was a huge name, and of course she still is, but it was still so fresh. She, I think, knocked it out of the park with her impersonation, with the makeup, with the look. I think Jaidynn had a full slam dunk this episode. She had a cool runway. It wasn't amazing, but it was cool. She did something with the prompt. She, had her own interpretation of it. And I think this was Jaidynn's episode to win. This would have been a really great story moment for her. Up next, we have the Despy Awards, and this is where things have to start shuffling around because Pearl is not here. I'm just going to make the easy choice and just say that Max and Trixie team up. The teams are given just by where they're standing in this episode, so it's not like there's any strategizing going on like who ends up with who. So let's just say Max and Trixie are standing next to each other instead of Pearl, just to make our lives easier. And that makes sense. I mean, they knew each other going into the season. They went to the same college. And I don't think a ton changes in this episode. I'm just going to change how I judged it, because this was like half judged in teams, half not judged in teams. So I do think that Max and Trixie would win this episode, because we know that Max wrote most of the jokes that they used while Pearl was like having her moment, like, is there something on my face? And then she stepped out. So Max wrote most of the material. So it's not like losing Pearl, we lose all of the jokes. So the material is already good on its own. But having Trixie there on top of it, I know that this was like, this isn't the Trixie Mattel that we have now, but she was still funny on the season. Like, she definitely was a little shyer and a little coyer, but she still has that comedic timing. She still is saying funny things. I think that she, along with Max here, definitely could win this challenge. So I'm going to give it to him. And this would have been a great moment for Trixie, too, coming back so hard from being in the bottom the last episode. And, her narrative being, you're the comedy queen. Where's the comedy? well, now this is a comedy challenge. Max really knocked it out of the park, and I think that Trixie could do the same in this kind of setting as well, where she's just on stage reading jokes that she's already written. This isn't like a Snatch Game where she has to do, off-the-cuff comedy. I think she would do well in this challenge, and I think that she would win with Max. And so for the high placements, I think the two standouts in this episode, besides Max and Pearl, were Ginger Minj and Miss Fame. If I had to pick one thing from this entire episode that is the funniest to me and that I still remember, it's Miss Fame's acceptance speech.
I can cry, but goddamn Botox got me every time. Other than that, I'd like to thank Mexico for the tapeworm that snatched my body. And the man upstairs. Thank you so much for the light. I look great.
She was so funny. And again, you wouldn't assume Miss Fame to be a comedy queen, but she did really, really well this episode. And of course, Ginger Minj as well. She had a really, really fun time on that stage, you could tell. And she had some really good jokes. As for the bottom three, I don't think it changes. Violet was okay, but in a challenge where most people did good, doing okay just isn't enough. And then Candy and Kasha were, in my opinion, the clear bottom two. Kasha obviously had her welcome moment, but that was not the only thing in her performance that didn't land. Her jokes were just not funny. Her chemistry with Katya on stage just wasn't there. And as the openers, you have to set a great tone for the night, and their performance was just clunky.
Now, Katya, what in the hell does DESPE stand for?
Well, judging from the looks of the nominees, I'm gonna go with desperate, egotistical sluts prancing in the yard.
And unfortunately for Kasha, she didn't get anything else after, so that's all we're left with. So then they lip sync to Lover Girl, and it's very close. I mean, this could have been a double Shantae, but Candy definitely, I think, takes it at the end, and we lose, unfortunately, Kasha Davis. So let's move on to the Ru Hollywood Stories Challenge. This is going to be different because obviously we have Trixie here, but the queens pick their own teams. We see Ginger, Kennedy, and Katya team up. Makes sense, the bitter old ladies. I think in this case you can just switch Trixie out because Trixie and Fame had a friendship. Fame has been doing pretty okay in these comedy challenges, and especially in this case, she just was in the top for one. And Jaidynn had just won the parody challenge, did good in the comedy challenge. So I don't think that Trixie would be like against working with these two. And then we have our three kind of outsiders with Max, Violet, and Candy Ho. So as for the tops, Ginger Minj annihilated this episode. You know, Katya was funny too, but I think Ginger had a better runway. I think Ginger had a better performance. You know, I know Katya's runway gets a lot of praise, and it's definitely funny, but at the end of the day, it is a sequin bathing suit and a sequin jacket with a hat and a little shark. So, like, it's good. I'm not trying to dismiss it, but people really say, like, oh, Katya won this episode because of her runway. And it's like, her runway was fun, but it's not, like, breathtaking. It's not, like, the best quality look I've ever seen in my life. So I definitely think this was Ginger's episode to win. But Katya definitely deserved a top placement. And I think Max did too. Max did this weird interpretation of Merle, which I think made total sense because she's playing Merle from Michelle's perspective. And then as for the bottoms, I think Kennedy really struggled playing RuPaul. It kind of just felt like she was playing Kennedy. There was no personality. And RuPaul is kind of a hard person to impersonate. I just think Kennedy didn't get it. And then Jaidynn and Candy were the bottom two. I don't think Jaidynn did all that bad. They definitely left in some awkward moments that easily could have just been edited out and would have been edited out for anyone else. But because they're trying to get rid of Candy Ho, and the only way they can do that is by putting Jaidynn in the bottom, they left those in to make her look worse than it was. I think Jaidynn did a safe performance and had a really fun runway. One that they didn't like, which I think is bullshit because I think it is so much fun. So the person I would have put in the bottom instead of Jaidynn is Fame. She really struggled on set. She was really in her head, and I think the final product was just kind of lackluster. There wasn't much to it. Even though she had a really, really good runway, I just don't think it was enough to save that performance. So I put Candy and Fame in the bottom together. They will lip sync to Break Free by Ariana Grande, and I mean, come on, Candy Ho is going to win. They literally had to edit out some of Candy's best moments towards the end of the lip sync that, other queens have talked about, just to make it, like, not have to be a double Shantae. So I think Kandy would definitely send Fame home here. And that's the second queen that we lose before they, go home in the actual season. So that's going to make this Snatch game a lot different. Okay, so we have Kandy and we have Trixie here for Snatch Game. I don't think either of them are going to do well. I think that Trixie probably would do better just because she is more naturally funny. We saw her not do well on Snatch Game on All Stars 3. But, I mean, Kandy struggled in basically all of these comedy challenges. And I don't see why this would be any different. So our top three, I don't think changes. Ginger and Kennedy both get the win. That makes sense. They both did really, really well. With Katya is high, and since Pearl is not here, she's not in the top instead. But if Pearl were here, I'd put her on the top over Katya. And then we have Trixie as low, and Kandy in the bottom with Max. And Kandy's runways just weren't... They weren't the best. So I don't know what Trixie would have done for this runway category. It was leather and lace, but I mean, she had some fun runways while she was there. So I think even her runway would probably be better than Kandy's. If they both like suck in the Snatch Game, then there's that to kind of, I don't know. That's just my take. She's going to lip sync with Max in the bottom to No More Lies, one of my favorite lip sync songs that they've chosen. And I mean, Kandy's sending Max home still, regardless. It's like, there's so many things where it's like, if Fame were still here, then I think that it's Max and Fame in the bottom, and then Max sends Fame home, but I don't even think Fame would be here. So sorry, Max. Like, it's kind of inevitable at this point that you are going home. And now we are at the Conjoined Twins Challenge, which gets interesting because, like, what are the pairs gonna be? I actually think that the pairs don't change. I think that... So Kennedy wins the mini challenge. She gets to assign the pairs, and I think that she gives everybody the person that is the closest to them when it comes to body shape and, skin color and all of those things, except for Jaidynn and for Tempest. And I don't think that changes. It's just kind of who's in the competition and who's not that changes. Like, Kandy still gets Fame, but Kandy's in the competition and Fame isn't. And Trixie still gets Pearl, but it's just flipped. And so we also kind of have to look at, would the ideas change? Would the looks change? And I guess there is the argument that, well, Pearl was in a competition. Pearl came up with that idea for, like, let's be, pageant, whatever. But who's to say that Pearl still doesn't say that idea? Just because she's not in the competition, she can still say, like, what if we did something like this? Miss Fame saying, well, what if we did something like this? Like, I don't think the looks... I mean, they could. You could say Trixie is like, actually, no, we're not doing that because I'm still in the competition. We're going to do this, and this is going to be great. But because Pearl's idea was good, why would Trixie say, like, no, we're not doing that? So this one is, it's like, there's a lot up in the air. There's a lot you just have to kind of hand wave. Like, who knows what would have happened? But I don't think much would change when it comes to the looks that we see. And from the looks that we saw... Trixie, Kandy, and Katya, I think, would be in the top. Miss Fame had these really cool plastic surgery looks, and sure, we've seen it before, but in this case, I think it was so cool. It fit the prompt of the challenge. You have to be conjoined twins, and I think that it was a really, really good look. So I think that this would be a moment where Kandy would be in the top. I also think Katya and Kasha did a really fun job as well, but Trixie and Pearl knocked this challenge out of the park. They gave storyline, they gave perspective, they gave out of the box, and it was a deserved win. So that means Pearl re-enters the competition. And as for the bottoms, I don't really think it changes. I think that Kennedy definitely deserved to be low over Fame and Kandy. Her and Jasmine's looks were just... they were just bland, It was expected from them. It didn't do anything fun with this crazy category of, like, be conjoined twins. So I think they definitely missed the mark. But Ginger and Jaidynn definitely struggled the most, unfortunately. And Jaidynn goes home here. But she still gets to go home with a win under her belt, at least in this scenario. But let's look at episode 9, which is the John Waters Challenge. We have... At this point, the exact same queens, except instead of Fame, we have Kandy. And this is the problem. It's like, Kandy isn't going to, at this point, at her drag career was not going to be excelling at many of these challenges. But this season has so many weak lip syncers that I think that she's kind of the lip sync assassin. I mean, of course she's going to send home Max. Of course she's going to send home Pearl. You know what I mean? Of course she's going to send home Fame. Like, come on. So, John Waters, I think that the top 3 stays the same. Ginger Minj wins with Katya and Kennedy in the top. You know, Trixie Mattel safe. The bottom 3, for sure, I think, is Violet, Candy, and Pearl. And, I mean, really don't care about Demi Lovato. We saw what Pearl did. I think Candy could do better. And Pearl goes right back out the door. You know, it's like a revolving door moment for her. Prancing Queens. This is a very interesting episode to look at because Violet wins the mini challenge and she gets to pick the partners. And she does something really smart. She takes Katya, who she knows is someone she can work with and is flexible and can dance. And then she separates the other 2 dancers. Trixie, I mean, she's not a dancer, but she can pick up choreo, as we saw with, like, Glamazonian Airways and all of that. And then she splits her up from Kennedy, who is, like, the best dancer on the cast. So Violet was very smart. She didn't partner herself with Kennedy because she didn't want to get outshined, but she still partnered herself with someone who's good at dancing. And then for the other 2 dancers, she split them apart and partnered them with someone who is not a dancer so that they would struggle. And I think the same thing would happen here too. Candy, amazing lip syncer, solid dance performance ability, and Kennedy, solid dance performance ability. I think in this case, she puts Candy with Ginger because they aren't close like Kennedy and Ginger are, where they would have like an easier time of getting along. And I think she puts Kennedy with Trixie, who they don't really get along, and she still takes Katya. So that's kind of how I think it would go. And then in that case, I think Ginger and Candy are definitely the bottom 2. I think Trixie and Kennedy doing the whole, like, twerking thing that they did, it would be funny. It was a solid job from Pearl, and I think Trixie would do equally as good as we saw her do with her own dance in the actual episode. And Ginger just struggled, and I think that was kind of the worst category to get, the robot country one. So I think that it comes down to Ginger and Candy in the bottom 2, and Ginger finally sends Candy home to Show Me Love, which is like one of the best lip syncs of the season. And we move on to the top 5 episode, which is the Hello Kitty Ball. How would this go with Trixie here? We know Trixie is a seamstress. We know Trixie can do comedy, would probably come up with a cute little Hello Kitty thing. I think Trixie survives this episode, no problem. But I think Violet, you know, I don't think Trixie could do better than what Violet did in that look. I mean, that's one of the best design looks we've ever seen. So Trixie makes it to top 4, which we'll talk about in a second. We'll talk about that in a second. I don't think the bottom 2 changes. Katya and Kennedy definitely struggled with their final looks. Katya goes home. And now we're in our top 4. So let's break this down because it's exactly the same, except we have Trixie here instead of Pearl. And I was very surprised to see Trixie still here. I mean, at this point, she has 2 wins. She's had a lot of weeks in the top. And I guess because I'm not the biggest Trixie fan, I was surprised that my interpretation, you know, she did as well as she did. No shade. I mean, I don't not like Trixie. I really do like Trixie. I'm just not like a huge, insane Trixie fan. So that definitely surprised me. But I mean, looking at all the episodes that she missed, like the stand-up comedy, I think she'd do good. The Rue Hollywood Stories, I think she'd do good. Snatch Game, I don't think she'd do good, but I think that someone else would do worse. Like, I just didn't see a path where she would, like, necessarily go home or, you know, be in the bottom 2 again. So, you know, here she is at top 4, and if we're going to be fair, the person with the worst track record gets cut here. On the actual season, that was Pearl, and she should have been cut. But in this case, Trixie had a better track record than Pearl, and the person who actually has the worst track record is Kennedy. You know, looking at the Dusted and Busted scores, Kennedy had the lowest, so she does get cut here, except in this case, I guess it's more fair. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but Trixie makes the finale, which is, like, not what I was expecting at all. But in this case, the person with the best track record wins the season, and that is Ginger Minj. Now, I mean, I've talked about this a lot, but I don't think that Ginger had a shot of winning the season because of who had won, previously. You have Jinx and Bianca winning seasons 5 and 6, two comedy queens back to back. I think that they definitely wanted someone different, someone more fashion, someone more modern when it comes to their, style of drag, just to kind of shake it up. And Ginger was kind of more in the vein of what Jinx and Bianca did. So I don't think that in that case she was going to win the season. I think Violet was the clear option there. But in this case, if we're going to say this is unrigged, Ginger did have the best track record out of these three. She lip-synced a couple times, but she also won a lot and was in the top a lot. So in this case, Ginger Minj wins season 7 of RuPaul's Drag Race. But like I said, it's kind of a wild ride. And not the ride I was expecting to go on, but that's where we ended up. So let me know what you think. Would you change anything? Would you disagree with anything that I said? Let me know. And that is the end of our season 7 coverage. The next riggory video will be the riggory of season 15. And that video is going to be fucking buck wild. So stay tuned for that. If you're not already, subscribe to the channel. And check out my podcast, The Rigged Recap, available on all listening platforms. Here are the links to all of my social medias. And thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch you all in the next one.